Welcome to the Marketing on the Move podcast, hosted by The Breezy Company, your go-to resource to master your marketing while juggling all of the demands of being a business owner. We understand that your time is a limited resource and marketing might be the last thing on your priority list right now. Our mission is to provide you with tangible insights and actionable tactics into the latest marketing trends, best practices, and strategies that you can implement no matter how busy you are. Each episode is designed to offer practical advice on leveraging your unique business strengths and efficiently managing your marketing strategy. Whether you're tuning in during your morning commute, between meetings, or while on the run, Marketing on the Move is here to empower you with the knowledge and tools you need to excel in marketing, even when your schedule is packed. Join us for a journey into making the most of your marketing efforts, no matter how busy you are. Welcome back to the Marketing on the Move podcast. My name is Savannah Abney, and I am the co-founder of The Breezy Company. With me today are two new guests to our podcast, along with our Chief of People and Accounts, Emily Hunter. I was recently on their podcast and had the pleasure of talking with both Heather and Preston Chandler of the Breakthrough Innovation podcast. They are the co-founders of Centered, and I'm really, really excited to get to talk to them today. Had such a good time talking on their podcast. So excited to have them. Thanks for being here, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So really simple, kind of to kick things off. Can y'all tell me a little bit about the story behind Centered, why you founded it, why you felt like you needed to start the company to begin with?
Oh, I think that's a one of those longer stories than the question probably implies. Centered started under a different name 9 years ago now,
something like that,
and it kind of became our side hustle when. We started it because we got really frustrated with not being able to do things the way we thought they should. Probably like every other founder out there.
Every entrepreneur ever.
Yeah. So we told ourselves we can do better. And I think over the 9 years, we've done better. Preston, you want to provide some color commentary?
I think it's been interesting for me that we shifted from kind of transformation in general. Yeah. I have a background in like lean manufacturing, operational excellence, and JL has a background in software development and agile, and we focused more on those things to begin with. But I think what really turned us as we rebranded to Centered and focused on that was how important it is to have human beings in the center. And so we tried to have a name that really paid that off. That we believe it's all about the people. And whatever methodology you're trying to use, it's about how do we help people work better? How do we help people enjoy their work and enjoy going to work? I've certainly been in times in my career where I was the axe. I was coming to help with layoffs and remove people's jobs. I don't like that. I much rather make it so people are happy to go to work. They enjoy what they do.
And help tap into that human creativity that is kind of at the center of innovation.
What's the biggest challenge or problem that clients typically come to you guys with? Like, what do you feel like is the biggest problem you face and solution you try to help people kind of work through?
We have a couple different ones, but often it's something centered around innovation. They want to be able to innovate better. They want to be able to innovate faster. Often they're just struggling to keep pace, or they can't come up with good ideas, or they have too many obstacles in their own company to bring a good idea to market. And so that's where we really enjoy coming in and helping out.
And I would say we talk about it a lot in terms of like a product or a service, and especially when we say things like bring it to market. But the reality is it's just as much about a process or a policy or something internal as it is about something external. I think it's a mistake a lot of people make to think that innovation really only comes to life when we're talking about something we're going to sell. It really comes to life anytime we're trying to solve a problem that humans have. And I think that's what really lights me up, is when we can help people realize they can actually come up with some really creative solutions that they didn't think were possible before, with the right help, the right support.
Love that.
I think it's really interesting that you both came from very process-oriented, make things go as streamlined as possible, and now you're in this human-centered sort of space. I'm curious, how did your paths cross? And also, how did you figure out you had this shared interest?
So we both worked at a company called VML long time ago. That's where we met. I don't know that there was anything special about the meeting. I think it was literally just we started working together on a couple projects. We realized we both had a similar view of the world. Right about the same time, we also realized we shared the same birthday, which is one of those really weird
No
facts that
way.
just, yeah. I've got 3 years more experience, but same born on the same day. So VML is the agency space. So we did a lot of work with a lot of different companies. And I think we just started seeing the same things happening over and over and over again, whether that was within the agency, with the client, just in general. And I think it was literally sitting down over lunch, trying to remember the name of the restaurant, and just talking about all the things that could have been done better, and deciding, you know what, let's just go do it.
I think just something that you said, Emily, is interesting. I'm still very much a process guy. JL is still very much a process guy. But I think what we found out is that it doesn't work unless you prioritize people over process. And you probably heard the adage of culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, culture eats process for breakfast. It eats everything for breakfast. And so we started realizing that it's actually about the culture. And we started having this desire to, how do we structure organizations or help them structure themselves so that they bring out that innate creativity in people, so that they make it easier for people to do their jobs. And often it's by having fewer rules. If you want an interesting book, go read the No Rules book. It's about Netflix, and they talk about how their culture doesn't have rules. And it's not going to work for every culture, but I think that's an interesting study in what process do you actually need? How much process do you need to make business work?
And it is funny, like, I think, speaking of things we see all the time, we hear a lot of people say innovation can't be structured. Like, you have to, it's just that lightning bolt moment. The reality is innovation is all about structure. And the companies that realize that and actually do things to bring out creativity in their people are the ones that are going to excel and really be agile, innovative, all those fun words.
Yeah, I found it to be true with our company. We're a fully remote company and have been since day one. And the rules for a fully remote company that has been from its inception versus a company that is not fully remote, or it went remote later or whatever, like, that's going to vary wildly. And the work that's being done, how the work gets delivered, like all these different things, we kind of, what we talk about is we have very strict scaffolding, and then everything else in the middle is very free form. It's very, very clear. Like, there's a few really hard lines we have that, like, these things have to happen and they have to happen this way. And these things are, essential. And then everything else is just kind of, it's like you have a few essentials and that's it. Whereas, maybe if you're in like a nuclear power plant, every single rule really matters, because like disaster would be a serious disaster. Like, it isn't one size fits all, because if it was, like, it just wouldn't work that way, because every industry is so different. Every space is so different. So I think defining your culture and then your process, based on your culture makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and I think one of the ways we look at it is you kind of define your sandbox, and then you throw in the tools that you are comfortable with people using. And as long as you have clear boundaries, easy to use, people-focused tools, and then maybe the other part of it is a really clear value proposition, destination, vision. Like, that's really all you need to get started. And then the only other thing I usually add when I'm talking to leaders is you just have to remember to treat people like people, not problems. If you can do that, people are going to show up and do their best, and you're going to get good results.
Yeah. And I 100% agree. I also think that's a lesson hard learned. As an extremely type A, intense individual, I remember early in of our business, I definitely treated people more like problems. Like, just do what I say, just do this, because I knew what it took to get to the goal, and I knew what we needed to do to get here. And I don't think I was wrong, but the way I went about it was not as good as it could have been. And I would have saved not only other people annoyance from me probably, but I would have saved myself a lot of frustration as well, if I could have had a little bit more, like I mentioned, like a few hard lines, not so many hard lines.
Right.
I think
go ahead, Preston.
One thing that we often talk about is having principles. So as JL talked about this sandbox, we often define the sandbox in terms of principles. What are some core principles that we're going to follow? And treat people like people instead of problems. That could be one of your core principles. But if you can always come back to those principles, then you'll find that your tools are used in a good way. Otherwise, we've certainly seen people use tools to beat somebody over the head with. And it's like, wait a second. That's not the intent. What's the principle? What's the purpose that we're trying to accomplish here? As we coach leaders, we often try to help them think about, well, what's the principle? Like, what am I actually trying to accomplish? What are those rules, the high level rules that I'm trying to follow here? And how do they apply in the situation?
Yeah.
We've got a couple chapters in our book about how you use principles to guide an organization, which I think are really relevant, because we do structure it, your principles first, your systems serve the principles, and your tools should come in last. Like once you've defined the other stuff, then you can start talking about tools and how they're going to serve the people and things like that.
So the term human-centered, I feel like it's getting a lot of traction right now. Like it's all over. Like we do a lot of workplace development. We do a lot in that space. We have a lot of clients in that space, training, e-learning, micro-learning, etc. And human-centered keeps coming up a ton. So I think people think they know what it is, but like I'd love to hear from you, people who are literally helping organizations do this, what it actually is and what it actually takes to have an organization that is authentically human-centered.
I mean, that is such a loaded term. And I think part of the problem with the term is it's so generic. I think if you're going to get it at its root, it really is treating people like people. And that seems contrite and maybe not super helpful, but I think, so take the example where you were talking about earlier about, I knew I was right, and I was. Absolutely. I think one of the first steps leaders take down the path of being human-centered is realizing even when they're right, they're not the only one that can be. Right. So it's that expanded worldview from yourself and the work to expand it just a little bit bigger to include the people around you, a little bit bigger to include the organization as a whole. And I think as you start doing that, you start realizing, even when you say things like culture eats strategy for breakfast, well, what it really boils down to is your people. And if your people aren't being served by the culture, if the people aren't being helped by the strategy, then it's broken. If your process isn't working, it's a bad process. It's not bad people. So it's starting to get that view that you're not there to tell people what to do. You're there to open the world up for them so they can get the work done and feel fulfilled by the work. And it's a little bit of a pivot, but it really does change the way you look at everything. And that perspective shift, it kind of turns into one of the core principles that's going to guide you as a leader.
I think one story or one experience that I had that drove this home for me, a couple of years ago, my oldest daughter received the assignment to mow the lawn, and she's responsible for mowing the lawn. And that first year was rough because I was like, you left a strip of lawn there. You didn't actually edge the lawn. And I was talking about all the things that she wasn't doing. And one day I was, my office is upstairs and I was watching while she mowed the lawn and I was getting more and more frustrated. And I was like, wait a second, am I growing a lawn or am I growing an adult? And so I had to pause and be like, oh, wait, that's a parenting lesson that I learned, but it definitely applies into the business.
For sure.
Is it about the result or am I trying to grow people? And if you're trying to grow people, then you being right is irrelevant.
Right.
It's how do you help them come along that path? And I think when we're able to coach leaders on that, sometimes we talk about it as the leader is a tiebreaker, not the decision maker. Because if they think they have to make all the decisions, they've actually taken that away from everybody else. Sometimes they have to break the tie because people get stuck. Okay. But exercise your authority in that moment instead of taking away someone's opportunity to grow.
Quick follow-up on this, with this kind of balancing this. So when you recognize that things are not working and maybe it was process and maybe it was these things, but you realign the process, but it's still not working. How do you balance knowing like, maybe I don't have the right people in the right seats? Like, what does that look like? Because obviously, you mentioned Jill, and like, I completely agree. It's not always like, bad people. A lot of times it's great people and it is bad process, but sometimes it's just, this is not a fit for you, or you're not in the right role or whatever. How do you balance those two ideas?
I think hopefully that's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
If that's happening a lot, I mean, you really need to take a look at your hiring practices and really understanding the roles you need, the skills you need, things like that.
Right.
The next step is understanding how you're growing your people, because your needs may evolve over time. I think most instances of where I've seen that really become an issue, it's because the needs have shifted since that person was hired and that person did not grow with the role. Now, at the end of the day, you are going to have instances where you hire someone for a variety of reasons they don't perform. And I think at that point, you do kind of have to decide what to do with them. And there's a lot of things that go into that. One, if there is toxic behavior, you have to remember anything that you tolerate, you are endorsing as a leader.
Absolutely.
Right. So the moment you tolerate a toxic behavior, you're saying it's okay.
Yeah.
So knowing that, like, that's where you have to move fast. If it's someone who's giving it their best effort, but the skill isn't there and it doesn't look like it's coming, or they don't want to move in that direction, that's where you have to really decide, what is it going to take for you to help that person find the right role and be able to look at yourself in the mirror the next day? Like, what kind of time do you give them?
Yeah.
What kind of help do you give them? What does that look like? What does that support look like? The worst case scenario is when you go to talk to that person and it's all a surprise. That hurts.
If it's
right.
a surprise, that's your fault. That's
Right.
not your fault.
Yeah.
Most of the time people know. But I do think it is important to look at, first of all, what are you endorsing? What are you allowing to happen? And what does that say about your culture? What's the best way you can help this person through that situation and come out on the other side okay, career-wise, income-wise, all that sort of stuff? And then what's going to be the best way to fill that skill gap within your organization, whether that's training, hiring, you name it.
Right.
And sometimes that might be helping them find a job outside your organization.
Right.
As we wrap up, I'd love to do a quick rapid fire here at the end, and then I can go back and forth on these. So I have just a few here that I would love to hear from y'all really quick. What's one book you recommend to every leader? Maybe you each have a different one.
We have. Well, then I'll go first on this one. The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
I mean, other than the book that's just sitting over JL's shoulder, which rewrote.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that too.
Shameless plug, please.
Yeah.
I think one for me is The End of Average. And for the life of me, I can't remember the author on that one, but I think it's a good look at human psychology and how we can't treat all the humans as average. Everybody is unique.
And to be fair, that's a hard question for us, because we're both avid readers. So anyone who wants a book recommendation on any topic, shoot us a note. I mean, we probably have at least 3 books you can check out.
Yeah.
I love that. Same here. We have an internal Breezy book club, so we're all over it.
Readers are leaders.
Yes. What is a coaching win that each of you will never forget?
I think for me, I had a leader who was facing burnout, and the moment that I finally got them to realize they could actually take a vacation and like step away and not check in with work was a pretty big one. And the nice thing was when they came back and realized the wheels didn't fall off and like people were able to get things done, like the lights that came on, the way they changed their approach, they became far more human-centered because they didn't feel like they had to be in the weeds. That was pretty amazing. And I love seeing those moments where someone finally realizes, oh my God, it doesn't have to be this way. Because it can be really empowering.
For me, JL and I do a lot of facilitation. That's part of being human-centered. We facilitate a lot of those things. And there was a guy in a workshop, 7-8 years ago, and he was interested in facilitation. He'd been doing some strategy stuff. He'd never really done facilitation. And I took him as kind of an apprentice over the course of a couple months. And he started doing things on his own, and then he left for a different job. And he reached out to me 3 or 4 years later and was just like, Preston, I have to let you know, I've had promotion after promotion, and it's all because of the things that I learned from you on how to facilitate meetings. And so I come in and I facilitate, and that's my role. And he's like, thank you for all of these tips and insights. I didn't think I did anything very special. I was like, you just come with me. But for him, it was life-changing. I think that's cool. And it makes you feel good. again, I don't think that I did a whole lot, but it made me feel good to have him respond and say, like, this has impacted my life. I'm grateful for that.
That's amazing. Okay, in it with a banger. Worst piece of leadership advice you've ever heard?
Oh, no.
I'm going to go first on this one. The client will remain unnamed to protect the guilty. They are guilty. I had a senior strategy officer tell people, if you get the strategy wrong, if you don't get the strategy right the first time, I should say, if you don't get it right the first time, you should feel so sick to your stomach and you should not be able to look at yourself in the mirror because of how bad of a strategy you feel. I was like, what? No, you can't say things like that. Yeah. It was bad.
That's bad.
I'll go a little bit more general, and this might require a short explanation, but probably the worst piece of leadership advice that I've heard is the customer is always right.
Mm.
And the reason being, like, it sounds so rational and like human-centered and all this other stuff, but the reality is that puts such a huge external focus on such a moving target that you really, it drives so many bad behaviors. It drives so much pressure in the wrong areas. It devalues the opinions and thoughts of your people and their ability to contribute. All these bad things happen around it. And I think, in all honesty, well, one, it's not the full quote, right? The customer is always right. Preston, you want to finish it?
In matters of taste.
In matters of taste, yeah. So that's the full quote. But I think it's something that the context has been lost in modern leadership, and we use it in the complete wrong way, and I wish it would just disappear.
Here's to making that disappear. Well, I just really appreciate y'all. I actually learned a ton as a leader myself through this conversation. And I think a lot of our entrepreneurial and small business owner listeners will as well. So make sure you check out JL and Preston's podcast, Breakthrough Innovation. It's everywhere that you get your podcast. They also have a book, so check them out. And tell them your website as well.
We go with just Centered.work.
Super easy.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all so much for being here. Make sure you tune in for another episode of Marketing on the Move next month. We'll see you then.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Marketing on the Move. If you're looking for more ways to improve your marketing and build a scalable system to help your business grow, check out thebreezycompany.co or any of the resources linked in today's show notes.